I'm your host, and welcome back to this podcast on the Diplomacy Next. We were quite off the air because of certain things that pertain to this study box academy, and this entire podcast series has been powered by the study box itself. So, the motto for that study box is learn, unlearn, and relearn, an education platform for young kids to make through. Uh, I'm being joined by Dr. Manjari Singh for today's podcast. We'll be tracking China's strategic involvement in the Middle East and some other developments in the region. Apart from that, we also would like to congratulate Manjari Singh for for joining as a uh, as a new formula as PhD coordinator at MIT Institute of International Studies. And Manjari Singh is somebody who doesn't need an introduction for that matter, but for the audience, I would like to mention she's an assistant professor with the MIT Institute of International Studies. She was a formal fellow at Center for Land Warfare Studies, and also former managing editor at Clause Journal. So, welcome to the podcast, Dr. Manjari Singh.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
So quite, I guess I have dropped you an invitation last year and we couldn't do a follow-up because of your packed schedule. I can
I'm really
understand
sorry
being
for that.
a researcher. So finally
Yeah.
you are here, and I'm so much pleased to have you on the show. And I'm conducting this podcast, I guess after 2 or 3 weeks. So it's nothing short of delight to have a person as well articulative and as well equipped with the Middle Eastern studies or Middle Eastern research things. So, kindly draw us a larger picture of currently what's happening in the Middle East, so that we can then do a follow up to see where the Chinese interests are actually, and what are the areas that China is interested in, and how it has been able to balance between the things in a region as fraught with conflict as Middle East. So kindly draw us a landscape first.
To draw a landscape, that's a very interesting question. Why Middle East is important today? But I would like to say that Middle East was always important. It's not something that has gained importance in the coming times only. In the coming times, of course, you are seeing two adversaries coming together: Iran and Saudi Arabia, trying to sort of have an engagement with each other. They have started their bilateral relations post 2014. For many years, they have not been in talking terms to each other. We also know that they are the regional adversaries for a very long time. So at one end, we see that China is emerging as one of the as one of the peace broker in in between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Another thing that is happening in the region is that we see that there are visible signs of US losing its footprint in the region, sort of losing its base in the region. So that is also another development. Third development is that UAE and Turkey and Egypt are emerging as very important regional players in the region. So that is another aspect that is taking place. And of course, we see that Israel. Israel, on the other hand, of course, it has been a very important regional player for a very long time. But right now, we see that it is sort of busy in its own internal dynamics, in its domestic politics, when it comes to the elections or the new laws, judicial laws that are being passed, all of this. So this is how the region has been. You can see the region in the current context.
When we talk about that, certain analysts are of the view that it's no more China's luxury in its diplomatic framework to maintain that neutrality in the region. And if we can extrapolate on that a bit, so that for the larger audience, it will be easy to understand what actually China has to balance, and what are the things that researchers like us look up to.
See, for a very long time, we see that China had adopted a policy of non-intervention in the region. It was not interfering in the internal affairs of the countries in the region. Also, because for a very long time, China was seeing itself as a developing nation. It was building itself based on economy, and economy needed energy. So it was dependent on the region for its energy requirements. We know that 50% of China's energy requirements are met by Gulf imports. So that was one of the considerations. But now we see that China is mixing its energy. It is coming up with energy mix. But again, still the dependence on the Middle East has been, overwhelming. It has been there. Of course, the numbers have come down from 50% to maybe 40%. But still, there is, lot of dependence on the region for oil. But what is happening next is that China is seeing itself now as a power from the global south, as a power from the eastern side. So non-Western power. So what it is trying to do is that it is coming up with its economic projects, and which needs a lot of investment, and it sees the Gulf countries or the Middle Eastern countries as potential partners. So that is another reason that China is also trying to sort of build its clout in the region. The third aspect is that China is looking itself, and nobody is talking about it, but that is what is going to happen in the coming times. That China is looking at itself as as a potential arms leader, arms selling country in the world. And why I'm saying this is a very interesting data has come up in the light, that we all know that there is a European war happening between Russia and Ukraine, and Russia is busy with that war. So it will not be able to sort of, procure or, sort of develop its arms industry to the level that it has been doing for a very long time. On the other hand, China, if you look at the, arms producers or arms producing companies, top 15 of them, 6 of the companies which were never, part of those top 15, countries, 6 of them are Chinese. So 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and then 14th positions are all acquired by Chinese companies, Chinese arms industrial companies. So that has become, that is a very interesting development that is happening. So of course, it would want to sort of, come into the, come at the forefront in the arms market. And if that is the reason, that is what is happening, going to happen, then of course Middle East will play an important role, in China's, strategic vision. Why so? Because we know that the region has been for a very long time, it is prone to conflicts. So they are always in need of, arms imports. So China is also looking at the market potential of the countries. And the fourth aspect that is happening is that China is looking at being a global leader. So, in April, in April 2023, they have come up with a new vision. They have come up with a global initiative, which is called as a global civilizational initiative. So through that, they are trying to build the, civilian, the cultural aspect, the, solving the problems of the, future, the problems that are going to be overwhelming in the future, such as food security, energy security, and all sorts of value supply issues. So that is also one aspect that China is looking at. Now, all these aspects, if you look at, in terms of China's rise as a country from the from a non-Western perspective, you see that Middle East figures very prominently in that vision, in that sort of outreach that China is trying to build. And of course, we know that Indo-Pacific has become the talk of the town, and everybody wants to be, have some share, and China has a very huge claim on the Indo-Pacific. So from that point of view also, China is trying to woo these countries in the Middle East.
And quite interesting. You mentioned a lot of things from interests of China and to the wooing of the countries that we talk of. And since this peace deal that has been brokered by, so-called brokered by China between Iran and Saudi Arabia, how other countries are faring on this scale. I mean, how are the bilateral engagements of China with the countries actually? Where are they? Where is China? Where are the other countries in the region that are toeing to this line of taking China as the global mediator between their conflicting interests? Say, for example, between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Now there's a peace deal that's at work. And what about the other conflict areas? For example, Iraq, Syria, and other non what happened to the non-state actors? How can China deal with them?
See, that's a very, interesting point. And that is why I'm trying to say that, for a very long time, China had adopted this policy that it's not going to interfere with the internal matters, right? And now we see that that is changing, because if you are trying to broker a peace deal between two adversaries, which means that you are interfering in the affairs of the region, right? Because if you are trying to build a peace deal between two actors who have been involved in proxy wars, like you mentioned about the non-state actors, how are you going to deal with that? Right. So I don't think at present they have that vision what they are doing, because this is what the entire region has issues with China, because what they say is that China does not have the pulse of the region. If you look at the, when we talk about India in the region, we always talk about the people to people contact, right? China does not have that. You don't see Chinese expatriates living in the region. So that is where China lacks. So there is no people to people contact over there. So if there is no people to people contact, you don't know the intricacies of the region. You don't know how they behave, their cultural aspects. All of that you are unaware of. Right. So, of course, that is going to be another, that is the question I also pose, that, okay, fine, this peace deal is happening, everything is good, everything seems very hunky-dory, but what about the non-state actors that both majorly Iran and Saudi Arabia have been using in the region? What about Hezbollah, who's going to, Hezbollah was working against Israel and Saudi Arabia, right? Similarly, so what is going to happen with these non-state actors? That's a very important question. I think China has not realized it yet, and I don't know what policies they are going to bring, because like I said, that they are very fascinated with this global word and the fact that they are going to bring in some initiatives. So in February this year, they had also proposed for a global security initiative. You know that China's any initiative that China brings in, or any white paper that China brings, it's very difficult to read through it. So because they say something else, they use a very poetic language. So it's difficult to decipher. But what they have said in this global security initiative is that they are not going to look into confrontations. They are going to avoid confrontations now. They are going to have more peace deals. They are going to deviate, like not work on zero-sum approach, but look at a win-win situation. So they are trying to coming in the mediation process. So again, it is a very self-imposed kind of a role that they are trying to play. The second aspect that is there is, if they are trying to play this kind of role, play a role of a mediator, which they have been shying away until now, that means that probably China is trying to fill the gap that will be created by US in the region. We all know that that US for a very long time has been a security provider in the region. So probably China is trying, up until now it was shying away from taking that position, but now, because of this peace deal, and of course they are also trying to broker a peace deal between Israel and Palestine, and I talked to both the stakeholders, both Palestinians and Israelis, and what they told me was fascinating. They said the same thing, that China does not understand the region. China does not have the pulse of the region, because if you are calling Mahmoud Abbas, we all know that last month, or probably this month, last month, Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian president, was there in China. So you invite only one stakeholder while you do not invite the other stakeholders. So how do you broker peace? So you have to be, you have to treat both these stakeholders equally. So that kind of thing. Third thing is that everybody is talking about this peace deal and everything, but it is a very superficial peace deal if you look at it. I had conversation with some of the Iranians, and what they told me was that, this superficial deal is because of the fact that Saudi Arabia probably did not want Iraq and Oman, which means countries from the region, to broker peace, because this peace negotiation is nothing new. We all know that in 2014, in 2021, in 21 and 2014, Iraq had tried to, organize some conferences wherein it was bringing both Saudi Arabia leaders and Iranian leaders to talk, in a closed door room, to sit together and talk about the, regional dynamics. That did not happen. Why so? Because Saudi Arabia thinks that Iraq is majorly influenced by Iran. So probably that is the reason they did not want Iraq to broker peace between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Second actor, which has been consequently working towards peace building or towards brokering peace between Saudi Arabia and Iran, was Oman for a very long time. But after the death of Sultan Qaboos, the new Sultan probably will need some time to sort of, balance we all know that Oman for a very long time has been a very independent player in the region. It has been sort of, working along with everybody. So that is the reason. So what I'm trying to say is that Saudi Arabia and Iran did not want, Saudi Arabia most importantly did not want Oman and Iraq to play a role. And of course, because we know that there is there is not a very warm relationship between Saudi Arabia under Crown Prince MBS. They don't have a very good relation with US right now. There are some coldness in the relation. This was a strategic signaling to US. This brokerage of peace by China was more of a strategic signaling to US that, we don't need you. We have another partners. We can, if not you, we can partner with somebody else can broker peace for us. And that somebody else is your adversary, is your global adversity. So it's more of a strategic signaling. So I don't think we should be thinking more on the lines of, China's ability to broker peace. It is very superficial at this stage. We'll have to, let 2-3 years or maybe more pass through, and then we'll say what active role China is playing in terms of brokering peace in the region. And on top of that, if you're talking about, again, the response of the region, how they are reacting to this peace deal, like I said, everybody says that China does not understand the region as yet. So that is the thing.
When you talk about the strategic signaling by China to the US, let's make an all-out comparison between the Abraham Accords and the peace deal that has been brokered by China. How do you view it as a research scholar?
See, interesting. So US has had the pulse of the region for a very long time, right? When we talk about the peace deal that was brokered between Saudi Arabia, between UAE, and I had mentioned in the beginning of this talk that UAE, Turkey, Egypt, all these countries are emerging as, new regional powers in the region. So of course, that's why you didn't see, because there's a coldness between, like I mentioned, coldness between US and Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia was not part of that deal, but UAE was, right? So if UAE is sort of trying to, the peace deal between UAE and Israel, you see that Israel is an ironclad partner of US for a very long time, right? So they have that kind of trust building mechanism between Israel and US. So that is one thing. Second thing is that UAE also, it wants to, emerge as a new player in the region, a very potent player in the region. And because of its economic strength, it will be one of the important regional players in the region. So by supporting UAE, US has been trying to say, again, another strategic signaling, that Saudi Arabia is not the only partner that we can have. We can have UAE as well. We can have Bahrain as well, right? We can have Morocco as well. So that is why. So this is a strategic. It's a Game of Thrones kind of a situation in emerging in the region, wherein they're trying to show that, okay, this is my partner, this is my partner. This peace deal is brokered by me. This peace deal is brokered by me. But the second thing is, when the peace deal between when the Abraham Accord was signed, the peace accord between Israel and Arab countries was signed, immediately in 2-3 months, we see that there are, there were many developments that had taken place. They had opened channels of, talks. Then we see all, then within 6 months, 7 months, we see that I2U2 is also in place. So they started building on minilaterals. This kind of thing, as of now, is not visible. It might happen, but as of now, we don't see much happening in terms of, the peace deal between, of course, they are talking about naval, naval, joint naval exercise and everything. So naval commands, building naval commands with Iran and Saudi Arabia. So it is more of economic. This relationship is more of economic, not strategic in nature. While if you look at the Abraham Accord, it has a strategic underpinning to it, because strategic underpinning to cater to the economics of the region. That is the idea behind, Abraham Accord. And here it is about China trying to be able to sort of, skim through its or sort of, channel its BRI in the region in a very holistic manner, in a very smooth manner, without any confrontation from any of the partners. So that is what China is trying to build. So it is economic in nature, this kind of peace deal. And otherwise, I think they are not going to agree on other aspects of the, security. If you talk about, I don't think they are going to sort of, they're going to sign a deal on security. So that kind of things are not going to happen. Economic, yes. So that is the difference between Abraham Accord and this accord.
There are also the way you put it, it's quite obvious now to the researchers and to the audience that we have, that what's the difference between the Abraham Accords and the peace deal brokered by China. But the larger picture still remains there. There are also analysts who would suggest that it's actually China trying to do a parallel thing, whatever is happening in the Indo-Pacific, since Indo-Pacific narrative has been catching up with
Yeah.
against China, and is China trying to shift the attention from the Indo-Pacific to the Middle East again, and how is it balancing the two things?
That is interesting, but if you look at the whatever is happening right now in the region is not sort of sort of trying to change the change the focus from Indo-Pacific to West, but it is part of the Indo-Pacific, because if you look at the region, it is part of the western flank of the Indo-Pacific. So Indo-Pacific is the larger picture. The only thing that China is trying to do probably is, and since 2012 it has been trying to do that, is that it is trying to strengthen its Western Indo-Pacific. It's because in Eastern Indo-Pacific, we all know that they have had good equations with most of the countries in the Southeast Asian countries, in the Southeast Asian region. Now they are trying to build the same kind of, or maybe more kind of, strategic warmth, to build a more strategic footprint in these countries to strengthen the western flank of Indo-Pacific. It is not a deviation. It is part of the larger game to sort of balance the eastern and the western flank of the Indo-Pacific. So this is what China has been doing to sort of, so engaging. So like I said, that for a very long time, it was not, before 2013, 2012, it was not looking at the region from any strategic point of view. It was looking at the region only in a transactional manner. After 2012, after 2013, we see that the entire dynamics has changed. Of course, they are, forcing economic diplomacy in that. But again, we see that there are visible signs that China is building strategic footprint in the region. And those visible signs are something that one cannot ignore. I mean, China has signed a $400 billion deal with with Iran, in terms, and it has also included defense in that. Similarly, it is working along with Saudi Arabia to enrich uranium. So these they are also selling drones, CH-4 unmanned vehicles. They're also selling wing-loom drones to these countries, which US had sort of denied these countries, right? So that kind of the prototype of wing-loom 1 and 2 have been sort of sent to these countries, exported to these countries. So these kinds of developments clearly tell you that it is building this country. And of course, you see that, like I said in the beginning, that this is a very geostrategic region. For a very long time, it has been a strategic region, because if you look at it, the four choke points, important choke points, all of them are in the Middle East and North Africa. Right? You have Bab el Mandeb, you have Hormuz Strait, you have Suez Canal, and all sorts of things, Gulf of Aden, and all of that. So it is a very strategic region. And of course, oil is there. And now you see there are other resources that are there. So, and then China, we know that China is sort of now trying to build ports all over the world, especially in South Asian region and the West Asian region. So it has been developing ports. It was trying to build military ports, military bases as well. But then, in 2021, I guess, yes, in 2021, they were trying to build Fujairah port. It did not come into, picture. It did not come into the international news framework. But US had intervened. US had to intervene and the work was stopped. Right? So these kind of developments tell you that China is building inroads in the region. It is trying to, sway the region through its economic projects. So, and it is a win-win situation for China as well as for the countries in the region. So, yeah.
The important players that are the important players in the region, like Saudi Arabia, Iran, they do have a deal now that's at work. But then there is also an important player that was at, as you mentioned rightly, that it's the ironclad strategic partner of the US, that's Israel. How does Israel see the Chinese involvement and the strategic involvement in the region?
For a very long time, they were okay with it, because we see that, there was defense imports happening from Israel to China and vice versa. So for a very long time, Israel and China relations were sort of, very good. They were, again, economic in nature, not strategic in nature. But now, if you look at Israel, and I talk to a lot of Israeli friends, they'll tell you that China, again, it does not want to get involved because of the India angle. Because Israel and India are better partners than China and Israel. So because of that Indian angle in the Israeli, strategic mindset, China is not so eager to develop, beyond economic relations with Israel. Second important thing is that if you note that Haifa port lease was given to India, to Adani Group, right? Not to China. China had also put its bid for the same, but it was not given to Chinese company. It was given to India. So there is a goodwill developed between India and Israel, and because of that, China is little sort of not it chooses its partners in a very different way. So it is sort of it knows that Israel and India, they have very good cultural connect, very good economic relation, defense relation, all sorts of relations you can think of. So they are not very keen to develop it beyond economics, yes, but beyond that, no. And especially after saying that, after the news that China is going to sort of broker peace between Israel and Palestine, I think that has irked the Israelis a lot. So that is another thing, that China and Israel, not so much. They are friendly, but not so much, not as India and Israel.
And when we talk about after the dehyphenation of US from the region, most of the analysts suggested that it will be an entirely region where Russia will have an upper hand in balancing the things. Now that China has entered the region with its strategic interests, why does this China and Russia thing? Do they collide? Is there, as the way they put forward an alternative to the US-led world order? Why does it stand in the Middle Eastern region, the Russia and China, the collaboration and the consensus, or the cooperation, we can say?
Okay. Again, a good question, but I just want to correct that there is no dehyphenation of US. US is not saying that it is ousted from the region. It is very much over there. It's not. It has been signaling during the Trump administration, but administration to administration, things change. So during the Trump's time, it was, it was an idea that he had developed, that it is that his country is not going to sort of, invest its troops in the region, and that the region should take care of themselves. That was a position taken by the Trump administration, not in the present context, in the present administration. But that's an interesting point, that now, Russia, we all know that there was a talk that Russia probably would regain its influence or clout in the region, but that did not happen. Of course, now it's not possible because of the European war that is happening and all of that. China, on the other hand, is building building its strategic footprint in the region. And why China and Russia? Is there a possibility of China and Russia coming together and, having their joint interaction with the region? That sort of happened. That happened. But,
You're on mute.
the countries also, UAE, for instance, every deal that is there, is sort of, am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Okay. So so they had an overall sort of clout in the region. While if you look at China and Russia, China is now building one. Russia had only few partners in the region, so to say. It had definitely it had a role to play in Syria, but again it was against the regime. We see that the Assad regime is now gaining prominence. Now Assad regime is being sort of, supported by Saudi Arabia and other countries. So that was it. So Russia was trying to sort of, favor the opposition parties. It had a role to play in Libya as well. But beyond that, the size of the clout is very minimal. It is only limited to Syria, to Libya, to Iran, and to Turkey, not so much as US. So that is why you don't see a lot of, Russian involvement in the region. Same goes for China. For a very long time, it did not have, like I just mentioned, that it will not have that kind of relationship with Israel because of the India connection and because of the US. That block. Saudi Arabia is something that one will have to look at, that whether it is going to whether it is going to fall into the trap of China, whether it is going to side with China or not, or whether it is going to again go back to the Western bloc. So that still remains to be seen. But what I'm trying to say is that the size of the clout that China and Russia combinedly have in the region is very small compared to the US. So as of now, that is not happening. In the future, maybe. One doesn't know.
That's quite fascinating. And then one last thing I'd like to talk about is India and the Middle Eastern region are closely connected via people-to-people cooperation. And then India's engagement with the region has been quite, since 2014, it has increased, and India has been, always taken by the region as a very warm partner, as a warm friend, be that with relations with Israel, be that relations with Saudi Arabia, be that relations with any other individual country for that matter. And the key difference between India and China is that China is there for the economic interests. India has a larger than economic thing that it connects it with the region. What are the key takeaways for the Indian foreign policy, be that challenge or anything that we can talk about, or for the researchers to look up to when they look down the line after 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years at the region? What are the areas that they have to look into?
Interesting point. Global supply chains. So global supply chain is something that India can make a difference in the region, because if you look at the region, we all know that all the countries in the region have adopted the Sustainable Development Goals, Vision 2030. India is also doing the same. But it is a necessity for the country, for the regions in the country, for the country in the region, right? What is happening over there is that we all know that most of the Gulf countries, if you talk about, they are oil-rich countries, but it is a non-renewable resource, right? It is not going to stay there for long. it will wipe out in some years. And because of that, there are climatic, conditions that have been, having a very strong hold on the region. We see that most of the area in the Middle East is a desert, right? So desertification has become a very important, aspect in the country. The third aspect is that because of the climatic condition, because they don't have much of agricultural land for agriculture, they are dependent on import of food, right? And that sort of, that became a challenging aspect for them. Of course, you can say that the countries in the region, most of the countries in the region are rich, so they can afford to import food items from the, outside world. But then came COVID, and then came the European war, the Russia and Ukraine war. So these two aspects posited a question on the food security aspect of these countries, right? So food security aspect, what happened was that there was a supply disruption with the pandemic. With the onset of the pandemic, we saw that the borders were closed. So how do you import food? So which means that you will have to grow your own food. You will have to have some sustainable solution. And then this Russia-Ukraine war, both Russia and Ukraine, they used to export around 90% of their export used to go to these countries, right? And that is why we see that Egypt, after the, in 2021, Egypt agreed to import wheat from India, which it had not for a very long time, right? So this global supply chain is something that India can really make a difference, both in terms of, like I said, non-renewable energy. So what do you look for next? Green hydrogen. You look for cleaner forms of energy, right? So and it's not like these are futuristic things. These are things that India is already doing with these countries. We saw that, the Prime Minister was in Egypt a few days back. And before that, we already see that there was a deal signed between India and Egypt on manufacturing green hydrogen, right? On the port development, on the Suez Canal SC zone, the Suez Canal Special Economic Zone. So India is investing in that now. Similarly, we see I2U2. If you look at the components of I2U2, what are they focusing on? They're focusing on energy, they are focusing on food. So global supply chain is something that India can make a huge difference in the region. And that is what it is going to plan for next 15 to 20 years, I think. And if that happens, then it will have a very huge role, not just in the region. Because if you are sort of, engaging with Egypt, now Egypt is a gateway to other regions as well. It will connect you to Africa. It will connect you to Europe as well. So your market expansion happens. So by involving itself in the global supply chains, in the global value chains, India can sort of, build its market beyond the Middle East. So that is one thing that India should be looking at. And that is one thing that the researchers of this area should be focusing on in the coming times. And that is sustainable. So, yeah.